Hi. Today the main topic is the difference between CSR and SSG and SSR. And before begin, um, I think this video is gonna be for the August 2nd, because I was so busy that because I'm making a new service, and it's already beta launch. So beta launch is on the this 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 Tuesday. So I have no time for making a video. So, but right now I'm just gonna retake the video um, for it. So let's begin. So if you're a front end engineer, um you might get confused that what is CSR, NSG, and SSR. Normally we use React library for it, but the question is, why we are using React? But why? So using React, we can solve the problem that if the data they consist with some kind of UI, for example button, and if this data change, this button UI has to be changed. So those kind of synchronization has to be stick around. If there's something wrong with the data, if there's something changes, this button has to changes, and this also called the state of it. So React, we normally use state in whatever state to make it as a instant changes between data and the button. So more important thing about React is not only this, is actually the JavaScript is doing everything. The React is basically the traditional way was make a HTML file and make the JavaScript file, and based on that you put document and get ID or class whatever and authentication to call back JavaScript functions. But rather than doing it, let React make HTML and make some kind of hook that integrate with the business logic of it. So basically, the CSR, we normally use React to perform the CSR, client-side rendering. Also means that let JavaScript do everything. Let JavaScript to even build the HTML, renders the HTML. So example, there's a let's index HTML. If you build or if you use React, you might able to see index HTML on the file on the one root of your folder, and in this HTML there's only div ID app. Which is also stands for that the JavaScript, the React library CSR, it only rely on only div minimal ID app, because we based on this we can append the child element using JavaScript. So a lot of things can happen in the JavaScript, but there's something wrong with this those kind of JavaScript relied application. JavaScript is actually JavaScript is kind of like client. It's actually rely on the client. If user opens the web application, the browser, and if they click your tab, your website, this render process begins. In the render process, there is a own UI thread, or is it called the main thread that performs rendering. Since React and those kind of JavaScript is also performed in this only one thread, the first HTML in the JavaScript has to be executed and evaluated. So, but the other problem is that if the JavaScript chunk is, if there are a lot of JavaScript chunk in the one page, user might face the problem that okay, there's a JavaScript, but what if there's more JavaScript? And I just say JavaScript in the React CSR basically basically made HTML using JavaScript. But if there's like a lot of time to wait for this JavaScript, user will only able to see the white screen of it. So user will leave your page, and that's impacts on your application of it. So that is kind of problem of the CSR. It's really highly dependent on the user's environment, and this JavaScript is actually the building HTML of your web application. So since this building out HTML because your JavaScript is long and big, the user has to wait it, and if this wait time is long enough, the user will leave your page, and that is kind of bad aspect of their CSR, client-side rendering. And now it's SSG. The SSG is basically the traditional SSG was make HTML. It's just like it's just like HTML, dry HTML, bunch of HTML tags, and attach the JavaScript using JavaScript file, and so script type is gonna be less. So that's kind of known as SSG, static site generation, but and also means that it makes the HTML at the build time. But nowadays in the Next.js, we call SSG. We can also use SSG instead of CSR. Like example, I just said the class under rendering is using JavaScript to draw HTML. But the question is, if there's no API calls of it, why do we have to use JavaScript to make HTML at the runtime? Why don't we make perfect HTML at the build time? So that means the SSG of it. In the dev mode, we use JavaScript to make HTML, but if you're trying to build it, there's already fully HTML. So the user doesn't have to think about the JavaScript runtime. If it's like the event related the function, we can just inject JavaScript on the one button. There's nothing issue of it. And moreover, if you need some kind of the SSG with the API calls, you can just rapid API calls with the SSG. So if your HTML is highly dependent of the API, and also this API is kind of general for the general user, you can just use SSG at the build time, and you can just call the API at the build time and pass the data and renders the HTML at the build time using SSG. So the SSG is basically already can make the almost perfect HTML at the build time, so you don't have to execute the JavaScript to render HTML at the runtime. So this is kind of really difference of it. Normal CSR, there's only minimal HTML, and the cost is kind of small to render HTML. But using SSG, there's like per renders HTML, so it's gonna be longer than this, but not too much of it. But also the JavaScript chunk is gonna be really reduced rather than the CSR is, because in CSR we use JavaScript to make the HTML, and we put JavaScript to render HTML, and then we put the events of it. And I think there's kind of difference with the SSG and the CSR. And now SSR means that since we make HTML at build time, SSR is that when user requests for the HTML, it makes some kind of HTML, but every single request of it, not build time, not even the runtime of the client, or runtime on the server. If there's something request happening, it runs the making HTML logic in the server side and passes it into HTML, and so user don't have to think about like the cost of waiting JavaScript chunk. So SSR is a kind of server, not really static server, because static server it uses like one thread with a bunch of event listeners, asynchronous events, event loop. But SSR uses another thing, but whatever. But SSR, so the problem with the SSR is that it highly depends on the server. So server has to make HTML even the one request. So, but that's kind of be good, but you have to think about another way. So SSR is actually real server. You have to think about the what if there's more traffic, whereas what happens if the server blows, server like pop up, and also what happens if there's like CPU cost issue on the SSR, because you basically use JavaScript and make HTML at the server side, not the client side runtime. I think so. That's kind of difference of the SSR and SSG and CSR, and I think SSG and CSR is highly I think it's kind of really reliable and nice, and it doesn't create so much issue on using CSR with the SSG. So you can map SSG on the build time at the top of it. But SSR, it's kind of really, I didn't try, but it's kind of out of order of the front end development. It's actually a server, but wrapped with the server side, but I'm not sure about SSR. But SSG with the CSR is commonly good also. So I think this is it. Have a nice see you next time. Bye bye.